My name is Jamie Walsh. I'm running for state representative in the 117th Legislative District. One of the catalysts for my candidacy is when I realized that a mental health application was being installed into our school districts by our state legislators here in Luzerne County. The program had never been used anywhere in the world like it was being used on our children in Luzerne County. It's a program that's disguised as mental health, but it's really nothing more than a social media application where they're collecting your child's data, they're leading them down dangerous roads, they're confusing children that potentially never had a mental health issue before, and that is why I decided to make this public, come out and tell the people how their children in Luzerne County were being used as a psychological experiment and nobody even knew about it. Amy Carrozza is going to be joining me in this video. She's a concerned mom of one of the pilot schools that were used for this program beginning in 2022. And she was one of the first people to alert our state legislators about this program and the dangers behind it.
My name is Amy Carrozza, and I've been researching Kooth since October of 2022 when I found it on a school board agenda for my school, and they were approving that the program be piloted in the school that my daughters attend. I'd been attending school board meetings since the beginning of the year of the 2020-2021 school year and trying to get the masks off our children. I wanted to make sure I understood because I realized that there were a lot of things that the school board actually approves that I think parents should be aware of. So I saw that they were approving this Kooth, and I had no clue what it was. So I just started researching that it was a mental health platform that started in the UK around 2004. And I wanted to find out why it was brought to the United States. I did find an article that the British Association for Counseling and Psychotherapy, or BACP for short, they published it in September of 2019. The title of the study was Gender, Identity, and Suicidal Ideation. And in this article, it's mentioned that, I'm just going to read it, that between 2014 and 2018, there was a 552% increase in the presenting issue of gender identity across the 4-year period, and a 61% increase in the presenting issue of suicidal thought in the same period. So this article was linking gender identity with suicidal ideation. In a 4-year period, the number of users on Kooth jumped 552% that were now identifying as having a gender identity issue or, non-binary. And in addition, a 61% increase in suicide. The other thing in this article that stood out to me was they mention that the staff members of Kooth are required to do a training with an expert in the field of LGBTQ. And it mentions that the training sessions, encourage the practitioners to become aware of their own gender and sexual identities to promote curiosity and essentially empathy for young people. So that told me that the Kooth counselors were going to be talking to the users about their own sexual preferences, and I just thought that that probably isn't something that every parent would be comfortable with. It scared me that this is the only article I could find on Kooth, and it has to do with suicidal ideation in children.
In September of 2020, Kooth launched on the London Stock Exchange. At that point in time, Kooth was only being used in the United Kingdom since 2004, actually, is when Kooth originated in the United Kingdom. And they opened up at $240 per share. So from that point, September 17th of 2021, Kooth hit an all-time high of $404 a share, literally a year later. And it was going up like crazy. Well, then there were a lot of evidence of the damage that Kooth was having on the community over there. There was a significant increase, which we're going to get into those numbers. There was this significant increase in transgenderism in the United Kingdom. And a lot of it had to do with what Kooth was preaching. From September of 2021, Kooth went on a slide for the next year, all the way down to $110 a share. In November of 2022, they launched here in the United States. 9 months later, they were trading $374 per share. So if you had invested in November of 2022, if you had invested just $10,000 in this program, 9 months later, it would have been worth $33,000. Now, there's some very hefty investors that are out there. We're not talking a $10,000 buy. We're talking $100,000, $500,000, $1 million buy on this company back in November of 2022. 9 months later, their money would be tripled.
I continued my research on Kooth because there was a group of parents that tried to stop it from getting approved in our school, and it didn't work. So at this point, my school is 100% on board with using Kooth, the mental health platform. I found another article that, believe it or not, was written by one of the same people from the previous article. Her name's Charlotte Mendel, and she actually is a research lead for Kooth. So she's employed by Kooth. And it was a pilot evaluation. And I believe this pilot evaluation was used to actually even bring it over to the United States. But it was called the Pilot Evaluation to Assess the Effectiveness of Youth Peer Community Support via the Kooth Online Mental Wellbeing website. This pilot evaluation looked at 302 Kooth users in the UK, and then just 1 month after initial sign-on, they evaluated them on the effectiveness of Kooth. So 300 students or 300 children were asked to participate and then followed up 1 month later. 302 users to start, and only half, after just 1 month, responded on their usage of Kooth, in which 30 students or adolescents reported feeling better after initial sign-on, just 1 month. This is the only study to date that's been on the effectiveness of Kooth, and the findings suggest that it might play a preventative role in relation to the risk of worsening mental health.
Brian Thomas was appointed mayor in January of 2022 of 44, Pennsylvania, after the existing mayor had resigned. Andy Kaczynski was elected as mayor of 44. And one day before starting his third term in office, he resigned. Brian Thomas was appointed mayor to take his position the day after he resigned. From that point, in February of 2022, Brian Thomas was hired as a consultant with Kooth USA. He has a background in healthcare IT. That's his background. And that is his explanation, in his own words. His experience in healthcare IT is why he was hired on as a Kooth consultant. Really, in Pennsylvania, our state law is weak. At 14 years old, if a child needs mental health treatment, at 14 years old, they do not have to get parental consent, parental knowledge, none of that. So why that's dangerous, it opens the door for predatory companies like Kooth to incentivize themselves on our children's mental health. The Pennsylvania Department of Health and Human Services and Kooth signed a $3 million taxpayer-funded grant to offer free mental health services to schools, citing the fact that school counselors are overwhelmed, there's not enough of them, and they thought it could be a way to help bridge that gap where they needed help, where the counselors needed more help. So October 20th of 2022, Aaron Koffer had made the announcement that they were going to put Kooth United States headquarters in 40 Fort, Pennsylvania, the first place in the United States. That was the first thing that had my antenna go up. The second thing is that they were specifically hoping to be inside of 30 school districts, and that they were going to provide free mental health services. It was actually a $3 million taxpayer-funded grant that was paying for this program. On November 1st of 2022, Lisa Baker announced in a press release that there were four school districts that were going to be involved in this pilot program. It was Wyoming Valley West, Wyoming area, both from Luzerne County, Oswego Valley, which is a very rural school, and Scranton School District. Those four school districts combined, Kooth had access to over 17,000 students. Also in the press release, Lisa talks about how it was a bipartisan effort to get this program in. It's a $3 million pilot program with the Department of Health and Human Services, and that it's the need in our communities that's very pressing. We're going to go back to April of 2022 to March of 2023. A lobbyist, I'm going to read you the direct definition from Merriam-Webster. A lobbyist is one who conducts activities aimed at influencing or swaying public officials, and especially members of a legislative body, on legislation, a person engaged in lobbying public officials. And some of the things that lobbyists will spend that money on, they'll spend money on propaganda, they'll spend money on studies to make what they're trying to sell look good, like it's a good idea to do. They'll spend money on reimbursing public officials for expenses on trips and so on and so forth. And from April of 2022 until March of 2023, Kooth, their lobbying firm, spent $57,000 in the state of Pennsylvania during that time. So in February of 2023, State Representative Ryan Bizzarro made a Facebook post. And in that Facebook post was 3 senators, Marty Flynn, Chris Gebhardt, and James Dillon. And there were also 3 state representatives present in the photo that he posted online: Mike Cabell, Aaron Koffer, and Bizzarro himself. The first question that comes to mind is, why are they in Arizona when they are paid for by the Pennsylvania taxpayers here? Secondly, the purpose of their trip was to promote Kooth to the Arizona State Legislature, and they did that by using a case study that was utilized for this presentation, and all of the data that they had was only 3 months old. It was from using our kids that were in these pilot program schools. They took that data and went down and presented it. This is where the propaganda machine comes in, because if you talk to any professional in the medical field, there are no studies that you can effectively present in 2.5 to 3 months of data. Case studies take years to get true effective analysis, analytics on, and making sure that you have accurate information before presenting it or using it for presentations. So our 3 state representatives and our 3 state senators that went on that trip, on February 15th, it was reported on their lobbying disclosure form that they all received reimbursements for going on that trip. This is where I have a major problem because, again, we're dealing with a lobbying firm here, and the lobbying firm, it just happened to be Super Bowl week down in Arizona. The Philadelphia Eagles were playing the Kansas City Chiefs. They're down there on an expense reimbursed trip. They're Pennsylvania taxpayer funded employees, not Arizona or Kooth lobbying firm funded employees. And it's a real big issue because where do you draw the line with things like this that come up? Also in February, 6 days after the Arizona trip, Kooth is introduced into Philadelphia Area School District. Now Kooth has access to almost 200,000 students. Philadelphia being the largest school district in the state of Pennsylvania. It's the 8th largest school district in the entire country. What bigger cash cow can Kooth have than Philadelphia School District? In April of 2023, so basically 6 weeks after the introduction of Kooth into Philadelphia school districts, they have Philadelphia Eagles superstar Lane Johnson, and they call Lane Johnson the ambassador for Kooth, and they make him the face, using a celebrity as a face for Kooth in Philadelphia. What's worse about this is they told all the school districts in Philadelphia, whatever school district had the most accounts created on Kooth would eventually get a chance to meet Lane Johnson. This is enticement. You can't do that. Kooth is a social media platform, a moderated social media platform. So they're very similar to like a Facebook, a TikTok, any social media platform. And in May of 2023, this is extremely dangerous and taxpayers really need to pay attention to this. In May of 2023, the Supreme Court ruled that big tech companies, social media platforms, cannot be held responsible for any third-party incidents that were to happen from use of their platforms. This is extremely dangerous because now, if a child has an interaction with Kooth and they decide to change their gender because of an interaction with Kooth, the family can't even, or the child cannot even go back into Kooth for the interaction. Again, it's a third-party interaction. But they can come back and they could sue the local school district for introducing this program to their child. So this is a major taxpayer problem on top of everything else that Kooth is, that Amy spoke about. This is extremely detrimental to the taxpayers because we're talking multi-million-dollar lawsuits that are going to be coming down the pipeline because of the interactions with this company.
So in May of 2023, I saw that our area was putting on a legislative breakfast in which our local legislators were going to be present. And it said, no question was too small. Ask your questions, ask your representatives what concerns you. And I signed up to go because I thought it was going to be an open forum, like a question and answer. And I had typed up everything that I wanted to ask my local representatives because I wasn't having any luck getting Kooth out of my child's high school. They were all lined up. I didn't know who knew anything about Kooth. I knew Aaron Coffer and Lisa Baker did because they had done press releases and they had mentioned the grant. So I just basically asked if they had done any research on the company. And Mike Cabell and Aaron Coffer spoke to it. They mentioned that because of the shortage of guidance counselors in schools and kids in the mental health crisis, that they felt that this was something that they could do. so that was sort of the reason. But after the breakfast, I got a chance to talk to them, and they gave me the impression that they had not really done much research on Kooth. They were surprised at the gender ideology that Kooth promotes, and they told me that they wanted me to send them more information and they would look further into it.
So I am a supporter of a company like Kooth coming into our schools. We certainly should have some say, and we certainly should have oversight, but we need to really work creatively. The business world, the counties, the state, and federally, money's dumping into this problem, but we need to sit down and have a nuanced discussion on how we're actually using this money so it's used correctly and we tackle this problem, because we're not headed in a good direction.
So after the legislative breakfast in May, I didn't really hear anything more from the legislators that were there, but I continued to follow Kooth in the news. And it seemed to be like July and August timeframe of 2023, a number of articles in the UK, in Scotland, and even Arizona started to pop up with concerns that this platform was a dangerous platform to adolescents, especially teen girls.
In September of 2023, we were getting very impatient with our legislators. They knew the problems with the program. They've received emails. They were obviously questioned at the legislative breakfast in May that Amy spoke to. And finally, Mike Cabell was doing a coffee and conversation at the library in Whitehaven. Dave Argall was going to be present. Senator Argall was going to be present at this same event, which was fantastic because he's the chairman of the Education Committee in Harrisburg. What two better people could I have an audience of to ask to stop this program? So at the end of the coffee and conversation, I waited until the last speaker because there were locals there that wanted to speak and they had concerns about some things going on in the community. So I waited till the final person and I raised my hand and I stood up and requested Mike Cabell and Senator Argall to come out and warn the parents about this program that's in Luzerne County schools. We need a statement from you publicly to come out and say, we found out some information about this platform. If your school district is using it, you should really consider putting it on pause. That's all we're asking. But none of you.
Mike and I will talk after the meeting. I don't see any problem from my own perspective making a public statement along those lines. Let me make sure that Mike is
And we have
at 1 o'clock with the executive director of the Senate Education Committee. Let me get an update from her on it.
and we have tons of data.
The issue I'm only working on, but yeah.
Can you send us?
Amy has a binder of data with her to show you the dangers of this program.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Let me work with Mike.
And I'm a senior and I had no idea about this. So you're absolutely correct. They should be letting everybody know what's going on in this group. I just can't believe how it's changed since my kids were in school. It's unbelievable.
I'm going to give you a call and we are going to put together a statement about Kooth and we're going to put it out to the parents of this community so they know that it is in the school districts. Nothing ever happened. Not one statement from either one of them. Even up until this day, we're talking 7 months later now, not one statement from Dave Argall or Mike Cabell about Kooth. So after 6 months of deafening silence by our legislators in Pennsylvania, they were completely ignoring us. In fact, Aaron Coffer had reached out to Amy in August, made a phone call to her, and told her that he was going to be proactive and kind of blow the whistle on this program. Still nothing from Aaron Coffer on it. I decided in November that it was time to run for state representative. I felt like my kids were in jeopardy. I felt like I have a 10-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old son. And there's one thing you don't do is get between parents and their children. And I decided to run for state representative for Mike Cabell's seat. I figured if he couldn't be a leader and take the stance for all of us parents that I would just go and take his job. Shortly after my announcement, I posted my announcement. I announced my candidacy Facebook Live. And it started to circulate through the community. Lou Barletta had heard about my concerns with Kooth and why I was running. And that was one of the catalysts that triggered me to run. And he had some concerns about after hearing about my announcement. So he had one of his people reach out to me, invited me to a meeting. He wanted to know all about the program. So I went and spent a couple of hours with Lou and two other people. I had taken two people with me that really had helped do a lot of this research. And Lou's assistant was incredible. She, prior to us getting there, she had done a deep dive on Kooth on her own. Finally, we had a voice that Mike Cabell could have been that voice. He could have been the parental right patriot. It takes Lou Barletta to expose the program. He writes an article that was published in the local newspapers on November 25th of 2023, exposing Kooth. He also posted that on his Twitter page. This is where things got real interesting. He gets attacked on his Twitter page by a guy, his name is David Thomas. Immediately, us parents went into reaction mode. We're like, who is this guy? Where is he coming from? Why is he defending Kooth? This is the first person that we heard defend Kooth publicly like this. And we started doing a deep dive on David Thomas. Now the walls were starting to close in on Kooth. Lou Barletta, a big spokesman, gets the word out there. Now a lot of people in the community are talking about it. The walls are closing in. Lou's getting attacked by David Thomas. I'm invited to a meeting at Leggio's Pizza in Dallas, Pennsylvania. And that meeting was between me and Mike Cabell, his campaign manager, my campaign manager, and there was another witness at this meeting. After about a 45-minute to an hour discussion back and forth, Mike's campaign manager looks across the table and says, you know, it doesn't really sound like you and Mike disagree on much. Now I'm thinking, we're not at the same meeting, because we disagreed pretty much the whole time about his voting record, his stance on Kooth, how weak it is, and everything else. And he said, you know, we could really use the money that Mike's gonna spend to help another Republican candidate in the area get elected. We don't wanna waste it on this race. We don't want two Republicans running against one another. So what if we do something like this? We'll make you the leading candidate for Lisa Baker's seat when she retires in 2026. And we'll cut you a $10,000 check for your campaign. Of course, I declined that. That was pretty much the end of the meeting. We might have been there another 4 or 5 minutes after that. This is how powerful this Kooth program is. This is how much money these people can make off of your child's mental health and the propaganda that's being pushed into our schools. They are selling out our children for money. And we're going to tell the rest of that story here in the next few minutes. In order to run for public office, you have to submit a financial disclosure statement. Basically shows where your income is coming from. And they were due by February 14, 2024. So immediately when it was available, I decided to go on Mike Cabell's financial disclosure statement. I noticed a company on his financial disclosure statement that he is an 8% shareholder in this company, and he's on their board of directors. And the company is called Elium Health. Elium Health has locations all around Philadelphia, where the largest population of students that have access to Kooth they live. You see, Kooth doesn't diagnose or treat children, but through the school district, they get referrals through to companies such as Elium Health. And the light bulb went off at that point in my head, and I am like, that is when I decided to do this documentary. It all came together. So it's no different than the Kids for Cash program that happened here in this valley just 20 years ago. It's just a different animal we're dealing with. You have the children, access to their mental health through Kooth. They get the kids twisted up in their mind. Between the counselors and Kooth, they refer these companies off, or refer these kids off to companies such as Elium Health. In March of 2024, I found out that on the Elium Health website, which I'm reading from right now, they accept two insurances: Allied Trades Assistant Program and Geisinger Health Plan. So that now opens up kids potentially getting treatment without parents' knowledge, parental consent, whatever, at 14 years of age in Pennsylvania. You see, Kooth publicly has stated that they do not treat or diagnose children. However, Elium Health will treat and diagnose a child with a disorder and potentially put them on a puberty blocker program, put them on medications that the parents don't even know. They wonder why their kid is acting out, and they don't even know that they're on these bizarre medications. And in Elium Health, they don't do the transgender surgeries. They're gonna have to refer that up to a surgeon to do that. And so it's a step process. And when I did this trailer, I made the statement that the trailer for this video, I made the statement that our kids' mental health is the next billion-dollar industry. There was a study done recently that every child that goes through this gender dysphoria, it's $1.2 million per individual between treatments, surgeries, medications, you name it. It just goes up the ladder. $1.2 million from Kooth to Elium Health to the surgeons. For the first time in history, there are the same amount of people detransitioning that are transitioning. That tells you that a lot of people made some very poor decisions, personal decisions, underage, without parental consent or parental knowledge. So as parents, we've been very frustrated with our state legislators, politicians, because they've been silent about this program. I'd like to tell you a little bit about a timeline, because now we got to wrap this up and make it all make sense chronologically. 2 months after the pandemic started, in May of 2020, the DT firm brought Kooth on board. So they already knew that Kooth was going to eventually be put into our school districts. That was their model, that was their game plan. Why that's important, and a very important date, is because we were only 6 to 8 weeks into the pandemic. How did they know that this was going to continue to go on for the next year and a half, and then eventually get into our schools? I think it's also very interesting that after May of 2020, Kooth went public on the London Stock Exchange with their stock, preemptively getting ready for this $3 million influx of money from Pennsylvania taxpayers. In 2023, March of 2023, Elium Health became a client of the DT firm. Also, the Philadelphia area school district became a client of the DT firm. So you have all three entities here, Philadelphia with 200,000 students, Kooth with this program, Eliam Health treating these kids because Kooth is funneling them children that may not have had a mental health problem before, but now they're gonna have that stigma on them the rest of their lives. The frustrations that we have, one more very important thing to understand about the DT firm is that when you look at their team, they have a member of their team, his name is Carson Baker. He's local here to Luzerne County. He's also the son of Lisa Baker. I would really hope that Lisa Baker isn't being silent about this program because her son represents Kooth. I also think it's interesting that since Lou Barletta kind of blew the top off of this with the information that we had given him, Carson Baker is no longer affiliated with Kooth as of February 15th of 2024. I had a debate with Mike Cabell on March 12th. March 14th, the relationship between Eliam Health and the DT firm was severed for some reason. It no longer exists. The collateral damage that is being done to these children, you'll never get it back. You'll never get it back. They're gonna live with this stigma for the rest of their lives. More than likely, things like this will end up having an effect on their own children in their own lives. Being that Kooth is a social media app, and the reason we were so urgent in trying to get our legislators to take action, but they sat on their hands, is because it is a social media app that is going to spread like Facebook, TikTok. So even though it may not be in your school district, it is in Luzerne County because of our state legislators' failure to act when us parents stood up and said, whoa, we need to sit down and talk to you about this. And now we're gonna have a generation of children because of this Kooth program with issues that they're never going to be able to deal with. And that's the real sad situation in the end. I feel like if it had not been for Kooth, I wouldn't be running for state representative. I wouldn't. I never would have known how bad Mike Cabell's voting record was either if it hadn't been for Kooth. So, you know, it's like, it's those two things that really have driven me to run for public office, because I know I won't be quiet when it comes to kids. I know I'm not going to say, oh, you know, I can't see this corruption going on over here. This is corruption, what's going on. And they're using our kids' minds. I mean, how do you sleep at night? How do you put your head on your pillow in the hopes of knowing that Kooth is going to refer somebody to your company that may not have any real issue? It's all for money. And it has to stop. It has to stop.